continuing a series of lessons from the book of Ecclesiastes. And tonight we're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, about the first half of the chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. And again, I actually titled this one, The Providence of God. The first three lessons that we did from this was the true meaning of life 1, 2, and 3. I figured we're talking about the providence of God tonight. So that's what I titled it. We want to look at the providence of God. And Solomon has a special outlook on it, a special take on it. And again, it's his effort to find the true meaning of life. And what he sees is that good times and bad times come to all. And it repeats itself in each continuous or coming generation. It's just the same things happen. And that'll really be borne out tonight. The process repeats itself with such certainty that Solomon concludes this passage, the 15th verse, by saying, that which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. So there's a continual cycle of things in nature. We've talked about that, but it'll be expanded tonight. But I like that last part. And God seeks what has been driven away. God never ceases looking for his lost sheep. Sending someone, sending a message somehow, whether it's through these processes of nature, whatever, the providence of God is there all around us. And the message that God wants to get out to everybody is that he wants us back. He wants us back, and he was so willing to get us back that he sent his beloved Son to die upon the cross for us. What a wonderful God we have. But there it is. Almost 1,000 years before Christ, Solomon is talking about it. So the wise person will understand and prepare himself for the ups and downs of life. Solomon reminds us here in this chapter that there are things in this life that are beyond our control. For example, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago, it doesn't matter whether you're rich, it doesn't matter whether you're poor. Death is going to come. You just can't stop it. But you can prepare for it. You can be ready for it. You can be ready for judgment and eternity. So there's going to be sorrow, sickness, and there's going to be death. Solomon's going to help us see that true comfort and happiness in the face of that will only come by placing our trust in God and realizing that God has an answer even for death. And it's being resurrected to a new life to live eternally and hopefully to live with God for eternity. So we should make the very best of life while seizing the opportunities that God offers us to have a good life here, properly a good life, and finding then the true meaning of life. So in our text, this passage tonight, we see Solomon contemplating the providence of God and how it works in our lives if, here's the key, if we'll allow it. If we'll be wise enough to see it and learn from it. So, the times and seasons of our lives are appointed by God, not by the birds. The birds with a Y. Remember the birds with the Y, the group that sang? Didn't they sing this song? There's a time for everything, there's... Yeah. Well, they didn't originate that, did they? That comes from the Bible. Can you imagine that? A rock song that comes from well, maybe it was a folk song more than a rock song. But it did come from the Bible because it's words of wisdom. So, we're familiar with it. We won't read down through it, but we'll catch some things out of it in these first 8 verses. All the items that Solomon mentions, we will come to know them if we live long enough. We'll come to experience all these things. So what's he talking about? Well, there's a time to be born and a time to die, right? Well, that's just evident, isn't it? But listen, our birth is outside of our control. We didn't ask to be born, did we? But here we are. And imagine the processes, don't want to get too deeply into it, but the processes that take place and the chances, the odds that we will be the people that we are, with the millions of opportunities that are there. Wow. Seems like an accident, seems like a coincidence, doesn't it? But God says that He knows us even before we're born. And He talks about that with some, probably with us too, because He knows what can happen. Now that doesn't mean He makes things happen and is the cause of everything happening, but yet there are things that God knows that probably blow our minds when we get to meet Him face to face and ask Him some questions. What an amazing thing. So, yeah, our birth is outside our control, and we cannot prevent our death. We can hasten it by doing stuff, stupid things, right? We can increase it by doing wise things maybe, but it's still going to come. It's still going to be there. Hebrews 9:27, and just as it is appointed for man once, or to die once, there it is, it's appointed, it's going to happen. But after that's the judgment. And that's what we've got to be prepared for. Death is certain, judgment's coming. Yeah, death and taxes are certain, but after death there won't be any more taxes. But there will be judgment. And we've got to get that message out to people. God is in control. Now the second thing Solomon mentions is that there's a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. And you think about that in the terms of nature. Food for survival depends on knowing when to do each one, right? If we wait till fall to plant our vegetables, we'll probably go hungry. You plant them in the spring, you harvest them in the late summer, well, through the summer, but in the late summer, early fall, and then you keep them for winter. You go to the book of Proverbs, you see, go to the ant, you sluggard. Look what the ant does. It prepares. It works all summer for the winter and probably won't even survive the whole winter. They don't live for very long. So there you go. In nature you see it, but why do we procrastinate? Why do we wait? Well, why do we procrastinate in spiritual things? There are things that we know that we need to be doing spiritually. Do we do? Or do we wait? Let somebody else do it. Let somebody else take care of that. You say, no, we've got to be doing it. See, that's a spiritual application of it. Matthew 15:13, He answered, that's Jesus answered, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. See? So there's the planting and there's the plucking up. That's not just a harvest plucking, that's a take it out, jerk it out by the roots, throw it over there, let it dry out, and let it burn. That's what God's going to do. And so we see that several times throughout the Scriptures. But see, we know it. We know it ahead of time. So it's important for us to remember that. Third thing, there's a time to kill and a time to heal. And I think that's referring to the time to kill execution of criminals, murders. The Old Testament talks about it. In the New Testament, it's a burden that's placed upon civil government. And, Paul writes in the book of Romans in particular that, the governor bears a sword. Well, why does he do that? To protect good people. And he should be doing that. Say, governors, presidents, kings, whomever, they should be taking the evil people out of this world so the good, so the meek can truly inherit the earth without too much problem. That would have a peaceful existence. So there's a time that, yes, you got to make a judgment, and you might have to take somebody out of this world. But there are also times to heal. And there are times of forgiveness. It's a difficult family member that maybe was killed by someone. We're going through that in my family right now. And, we don't want the person who did that to their life to be taken. We don't think that's the type of situation that's involved. We'd like to see that person rehabilitated. It's going to take some years in prison because, well, that's the only way to get him dried out from the alcohol addiction that he has. Now, I say that, you know, my family, my brother and my sister and I have talked about it. You know, there's hope. There's hope. And you know why? You know why we talk about it? Because we know that growing up with our father, we could have been in the same situation that this man's family is in now. Because I remember when I was young, about 10 years old, 12 years old, my dad taking me to the bars and saying, hey, if you see lights flashing behind us, you get over here under the wheel. Because it's better for you to not get your driver's license when you're 16 than for me to lose my license now. You know, I kind of hate that. I kind of hate that. I'd never put my children in that position. I just never would. But that's one of the things that I had to deal with growing up. So I understand a little bit, but yet that there are just times that we have to understand that as people. And yes, we want to be forgiving, but there are just times when we've got to say, no, justice has to be done. The fourth thing, there's a time to break down and a time to build up. There's simply a time to tear down old, dilapidated buildings and replace them with new ones. Right? Well, why would you tear down an old, dilapidated building ready to fall down anyway? Somebody might get hurt, right? Somebody might get hurt on your property. If they get hurt on your property, they just might sue you. Man, you got a whole mess of problems there. So, well, what's this saying? Hey, take care of business. Take care of business. Take care of business in your spiritual life, right? Don't wait for something bad to happen. And as for the church, hey, let's not be tearing down the church. Let's be building it up. Now, sometimes you have to, and that's the history of Israel. That's the history of God dealing with Israel, isn't it? And you go back and you look at what some of the prophets in the Old Testament had to do. They had to preach tough stuff, and they had to preach that judgment was coming and wait till God took stuff out of the way before they could actually start over again. And preaching, you know, Paul tells Timothy that reprove, rebuke, and exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Well, to reprove and to rebuke, you know what that's doing? That's tearing some stuff down. And exhorting is building it up. That's just what we have to do. That's, see, we understand it in the physical sense. We need to see it in the spiritual sense too. But that's the providence of God will be there if we understand it. Number 5, there's a time to weep and mourn and a time to laugh and dance. And this deals with feelings of the heart. And listen, the heart as the seat of emotions can often be deceptive. And that's what Jeremiah the prophet tells us. The heart is deceitful in all things. Who can understand it? So we've got to be careful. Don't make decisions based upon the heart or on the feelings. That's what young people do. I was discussing this with somebody, I forget who it was, the other day, and we were talking about it, and I said, well, you know, Churchill said that if a person is not a liberal when they're 20, they don't have a heart. If they're not a conservative when they're 40, they don't have a brain. Now you think about that. Think about young people. How do they make decisions about how they feel about things, right? But they maybe are not looking at the long-term consequences of things. So what is it? The frontal lobe of the brain does not fully develop until the individual is about 30 years of age. That's where the moral decisions are truly made. And that's why you see a lot of young people when they get to be about 30 years old and they've got 2 or 3 children or 4 or 6 or however, but many of them, that's when you see them saying, hey, wait a minute. There's more to this than just having a good time. And they start getting serious about life, and they start getting serious about eternity. So those are times. But here, a time to weep and mourn, a time to laugh and dance. Good times and bad times come into the lives of all. But Paul tells us, Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. You got a friend that's hurting? Hurt with him. Hurt with him. The best thing that happened with Job, when his friends came and they saw him, you know what they did? They sat down for 3 days. They didn't say a word. Sometimes we don't have to say anything. We'll get to that in just a moment also. You don't have to say anything. Just being there. Okay? Just weeping with somebody helps. But times of rejoicing, yeah, we ought to rejoice with them. Okay? Now, don't do stupid stuff, but yeah, rejoice. Rejoice, because that's the way God would have us to do. Number 6, there's a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. Wow. What's a farmer need to do? Clear the stones out of his field, right? Do you ever see those stone piles out there in the fields? Back where I come from, you see them all over the place. Take them out of the field, throw them over there. You know what they do with them in Ireland? Did you ever see those pictures of Ireland where they build those stone walls? Yeah, the fences. Put them to use. So you can clear a field, you can build a fence. Sometimes you got to clear things out. Sometimes you got to get rid of the, shall we say, the riffraff. Sometimes you got to get rid of the bad stuff so something can be productive. Do we see that in the church? Sure we do. And in the church, we talk about sometimes you have to disfellowship individuals because of immoral activities. Why? Because if you don't, it creates a disease, a cancer of sin within the body that can destroy it. And you don't take pleasure in it. Now some people do. Now remember some of those old Firm Foundation articles and stuff. If you ever read the Firm Foundation, there were other papers that, this gospel preacher would write in and say, I held a meeting in such and such a place. We didn't have any baptisms, but we withdrew from 7 people last week. It was, and it's like they were bragging about it. And you know that if you have to disfellowship somebody, it ought to hurt you just as much as you want it to hurt them, because that's what it is, that breaking of fellowship.
Or more.
Because they don't want, but you have to do it for love of the body. If you get cancer in your body, what do you want? You want it out. Okay? Well, that's in spiritual terms too. So there are times to gather stones, to cast away the stones, and there are times to gather stones, build. And Peter talks about the church being living stones. Gathering people for the church. And there's a time to embrace, number 7, and a time to refrain from embracing. And I think this refers to legitimate and illicit love. Legitimate love and illicit love. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 2 through 5, Apostle Paul talks about marriage. And I know everybody thinks Paul was a bachelor. I think that he was married at one time and lost his wife because he became a Christian. Okay? Because of the position that he held, it's almost unthinkable that he didn't have a wife and family. Okay? But he's able to offer this about marriage. And hey, here's how your marriage gets along. You don't own your body, your spouse does, and your spouse doesn't own their body. You own it, and you work together. The other part of it, the illicit love, Proverbs chapter 5, verses really it's 15 through 20. Now this is explicit, so I'm not going to read it. You can read it later if you want to. But here's how you should feel about your wife. So don't be looking over there at that other woman. Don't even think about it, you know. So here, there's a time for a man and a woman to come together. And there's times when they're not. I would say there are more times when they shouldn't than they should. Because God has a way of doing things and a way of expecting things in our lives. Number 8, time to gain and keep and a time to lose and throw away. So a wise person knows when to pursue wealth. And a wise person knows when it's prudent to submit to loss. Remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount? If someone's taking you to court to sue you for your coat, give them your cloak also. Before you get there, agree with your adversary before he takes you to court, because you don't know what's going to come out. Agree to it. Take a loss if you have to, because you get a crooked judge and a crooked jury, you don't know what's going to come out of it. So there are things. Now, when's the time? God wants us to prosper, I believe, not like what's his name down there in Houston talks about it, and a lot of other people do. Okay? Just follow me and you'll be rich. No, that's God in his providence takes care of us. But we've got to understand there are some times we've just got to say, this isn't worth it. This is not worth my pursuit. This is not worth ruining my health. This is not worth ruining my faith to pursue this. Time to walk away. And I think that's what Solomon's talking about here. There's a time to sow, a time to tear, and a time to sow. Now in the Old Testament times, even up to Jesus' times, the rending of the garment was a sign of grief. Something happened. They tore their clothes, and even the high priest tore his clothes when Jesus said that. He asked him, "Are you the Son of God?" It's as you say. Man, he ripped his. The high priest was never to do that. So there's a time to be sad, a time for grief, but there's also a time to repair that when the mourning season is over. And I've heard women tell, women who have been widows for years tell new widows, you'll get over it. Man, there's something wrong there. You don't get over it, but you learn to deal with it, and you learn to move on. You don't get over it. You can't. You simply can't. So, that's something that there's just goes with the providence of God. If we'll do it God's way, he'll make it all right. He doesn't want us to forget, but he wants us to go on. Number 10. There's a time to be silent and a time to speak. Yay! Wish I'd learned that one a long time ago. Proverbs 15, verse 23. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. The right word at the right time is good. The bad word at the wrong time can get you in a peck of trouble. But here, Proverbs 17:28, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. And how many times I wish I'd have just kept my big mouth shut.
Amen. Amen. Yes.
Are you saying about you two or just about me now?
I'm talking about me.
Oh, you're talking about, yeah, okay. Number 11, there's a time to love and have peace and a time to hate and have war. And again, these are emotional things, hate, love, and hate, but they're common to life, aren't they? There are things in life that we hate. Are there things out there that we hate? Are there people out there that we hate? Hey, listen, it's all right. Because there are things and people that God hates. How do I know that? Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19. 7 things the Lord hates, yea, or 6 things the Lord hates, yea, 7 are an abomination to him. Look at them. And the last one, he who sows discord among brethren. God hates that individual. Doesn't mean that God didn't send his son to die for that individual, but God hates that activity for certain. So what are we supposed to do? John 13, verse 34 and 35. Jesus said, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I've loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another." Wow. See, that's a high standard, isn't it, that we are to live by. So, man's duty regarding the times and seasons is to depend on things in which we have no control and learn how to figure them into our lives. It's going to happen. Are we prepared for it? A wise answer to these questions. Say, how do I do it? The issues and events of life that are beyond our ability to regulate are going to be there. Why? Because there are laws governing them. Laws of nature. Who put the laws of nature into effect? God did. What do we have storms? What do we have hurricanes? God put it there. Why? To hurt us? Maybe sometimes to get us to think about how we should respond to him. So all efforts to circumvent God's appointed seasons and times are futile. So man's duty is to recognize and accept the circumstances beyond his control. We got to accept it. There are some things I just can't control. Okay? But then we need to realize that everything has a purpose in God's overall scheme. Look at verses 10 through 15. I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. He puts eternity in our heart. We yearn to live. We yearn to not have to worry about death, but then he kind of covers it up a little bit there, doesn't he? Eternity's kind of covered. We have to accept it by faith, don't we? We sure do. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. Yeah, we just don't sit back and get it. God even told Adam, you got a job. Dress and keep the garden. Why? Because if man's not busy with God's work, you're going to be busy with the devil's work. Right? Okay? So, verse 14, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. There you go. There's your reason for a hurricane. To teach people to fear God. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. So we cannot fully appreciate the beauty of God's overall scheme because we cannot see the finished product. We look at a hurricane, we say, how terrible. You know what a hurricane does ecologically? It flushes the Everglades. All the dead stuff goes out to sea and it lives. It's like a season, isn't it? But we don't see that. We see buildings destroyed, and yeah, we see loss of human life too because they don't run when they should. But yet there it is. There's a reason for it. There's a good that's there, but there's also that spiritual good. What has God done? And what does God want me to do from it? So our view of life has been compared to looking at a bedspread from the underside. What do you see on the underside of a bedspread usually? Rags and seams and knotty strings, right? But it's on the upper side where the beauty is. We just see the underside. So God sees the upper side of the beautiful pattern his hands have made, and he says, now, one of these days you'll get to see it too. So hope you get to enjoy it. It depends on our response to him. So to help us understand and accept the times and seasons of our life, We must do all things from eternity's perspective. Our duty is to make the best of what we have been dealt, and we face only what people of past generations have already endured. There's nothing new about it. We're born and we die. And life is filled with that busyness that Solomon talked about. And that's for every generation. It's no different today than it was 100 years ago. The one thing we have to be concerned with is what happens after death. And that's judgment and moving into eternity. 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation is overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful that he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure. And that's where I look at myself and my life and say, God says I could have endured that, and I didn't. Shame on me. And I feel like the Apostle Paul, wretched man that I am. Who saved me from this body of death? It's only Christ, isn't it? It's only Christ that can do it. So, lessons of lasting value for us. Number one, life changes often, and wise preparation is needed to make the best of it. People who just go through life on idle or in neutral, shift here, shift go, just whatever. I know I use the phrase, whatever, but that's not a way to live. We got to have some control, but God's control working through us. Number two, there's a divine order that pervades human life, and it is proper and wise to accept it with meekness. I accept there's going to be a tornado come through one of these days and probably take everything that I had. As long as it doesn't take my life, doesn't hurt my family. And even if it does, got to deal with it. But it's going to happen. Got to be ready. So meekness will take care of that. Number three, we should seek God's guidance as we deal with the changing times and seasons. Listen, old folks, if you want to consider yourself old, us younger guys need your help. When I sit out here and I listen to y'all talking about your heart doctors and stuff like that, okay, I'm not far behind you, you know that. Lance isn't far behind me either, but we need to hear, we do need to hear those things, don't we, Lance? Yeah. Because you're living what we're probably scared of to a large degree. So you keep up. You keep strong. Charlie, get to the doctor.
Amen.
Number four.
Stepping on your toes. He's stepping on your toes.
Man's true happiness depends upon
Exactly.
God. The true meaning of life is dependent upon God. Our happiness then is dependent upon God. So there you have it. Even though there are many things that we have no control over, we still have control over these things. We still choose our own conduct. We still form our own character, and we still decide whether we obey God or not.
Amen.
Those things are in our control. All right, the lesson is yours. Thank you for your abundance of time that you gave me tonight. And God bless each and every one of you in the coming week. If you have need, let it be known as we stand and sing the invitation song.